key to what we're doing is we're dealing with a lot of different clients. So what we're building out is actually the ability to make the same solution flex and change and adapt to each of the different areas that we work with, all the different types of customers that we have. So I think that's the key part of it. And I think the main thing in all of it is just creating the mindset of the team is, how do you let this thing work without anybody touching anything? How do we reduce the amount of human involvement? So there's a collection of tools that we're using. Like at a software level, we're using a concept called a ticket state machine, which I won't get into, but it's kind of cool. It allows us to be able to change workflows flexibly and dynamically for different clients, obviously using voice recognition and quite a bit in the world of AI.
When the COVID struck, the numbers of COVID were lower than the opioid crisis, which we support. So our app was actually, the statistics is already out, and the coroner service would actually tell you that. So there's been the crisis, the twin crisis that occurred in BC. So that was where we began. But in the process of that, we are already a digital health company. We're agile, and we were all working from home and doing all the automation. But in the process of the whole of last year, what we found is that we need to further automate, integrate AI. We're trying to integrate more and more AI and also looking at machine learning to do predictive modeling.
From a LawPro perspective, we're not there yet as of deploying the new tech stack from an RPA, AI, ML. But essentially, we're at a phase right now that we're building the foundation, which is essentially going to be a critical factor for the long-term business health, as what you said, Jeff. So I think first and foremost, cloud-first strategy and implementing the SaaS-based solution. But the biggest one of all, and there was just a release, a press release that was just went out, that in 2020 we made a strategic decision to re-platform our central nervous system, our core claims platform. And that was really on the belief of the vendor partnership and influencing a culture that emphasizes on manual process elimination, therefore driving increase in productivity and efficiency. But to do that, we are essentially, with the amount of debt that's accumulated over the last 20 years, it's actually forced us to look under the carpet and basically say every single process is going to be either edited, or it's going to be modified, or it's going to be eliminated. Therefore, keeping the core focus of a modern architecture, changing the employee experience, and obviously redefining the customer outcomes.
We all have the same common problems because the approach in the market's incorrect. It's not holistic, it's not effective. Automation from our perspective is generally burden. The reason being is automation is tools and it's managed by SMEs. So we run and operate one level higher, which is the holistic approach, which is to orchestrate the entirety of the process, include the governance, and then focus on a metric rather than the ones that DevOps tell us to focus on. Like in the market, it's very common to say time to market, bad metric. Secure code delivery, bad metric. Increased code quality, bad metric. Frequent releases, bad metric. Thousands of code promotions, bad metric. And I kind of found this through an epic failure on my own end, which was, if you're a good leader, people work really hard. And if you're not measuring the burden at which the metrics come from, you don't maintain your talent pool, which is a common problem everybody has. You don't attract the talent pool because nobody wants to work super hard all the time. So if you create an orchestration process, instead of focusing on portions of automation, orchestrate all the process together, incorporate all the stakeholders and bridge the silos, what you get is a new metric, which is the technical debt of the process on the human being, which is sweat. You measure each component and task, how much burden it causes on each of the persons that produce your talent and your innovation, and then measure that. You can have other metrics, but if it's not in equilibrium with your talent pool, what essentially happens is attrition, lack of attraction, and then organizations that focus on low burden, they get your talent pool. The reason being is they want to live their lives in a effective manner. So we have to redesign the SDLC is essentially what we're doing on our side. We're not using the common metrics. We're entirely changing how we do observability, how we do delivery and deployment. It's all about the burden. It's all about the sweat that your team that you're really trying to attract to come to you. So again, that helps the healthcare space as well. low burden. You got to reduce burden before you increase it.
So the question we always ask ourselves is, how do we make these processes more efficient? And then how do we automate? And automating using scripting, bots, out-of-box capabilities of technology and services to support that agenda. So some of the areas that we've kind of focused on over the last 2 years is, from a networking perspective, looking at software-defined networking in our branches, deploying software-defined WAN from a DC inside of our actual physical data centers, using things like Ansible for deployment. Then obviously when we get into cloud, and we're going to talk about that later, but using infrastructure as code and pipelines for deployment. But specifically from an operation perspective, we spent a lot of time planning out our process, or streamlining our processes, and now looking at deployments of things like ServiceNow and Dynatrace to help us with automating some of the operational tasks that we have. And obviously leveraging AI and ML as we go through this. Some other areas that we're looking at is optimizing our position through automation on how we deliver things like laptops and mobile phones, and embedding self-service in that process as well. So we can relieve some of our team members from dealing with some of the mundane operational tasks and move those resources into more strategic elements. So kind of in summary, we've always started looking at our processes, streamlining those processes, and then moving towards automation.
The biggest area of automation and integration is around cybersecurity telemetry data. For context, I should probably just describe a little bit about Magna. You've probably all heard the name, but probably don't really know what the company's about. So we make various parts of various kinds of auto parts for new cars. We make seats and mirrors and that sort of thing. It's a $50 billion company. It's pretty big. The company basically consists of 350 plants around the world in 30 countries, right? So you can imagine what our global IT infrastructure looks like, and more importantly, the enormous attack space that presents to the cyber criminals out there. We've got 150,000 endpoints, laptops and desktops and so forth. Each of them have to be inventoried. Each of them throw off all kinds of cyber telemetry data. We've got a WAN, a wide area network that all the plants are on. So there's probably 1,000 firewalls on the WAN. Each of those throws off logs. All the servers throw off logs. All the clouds were on, the three big cloud providers. So there's just this enormous amount of cyber security telemetry data that comes from all these devices. It's actually, if you can believe it, 2 terabytes a day of data that is just logging data, right, that somebody has to figure out. So, and to top it all off, that's just the global infrastructure. There's a whole other realm of cybersecurity on the actual factory floor. We call that OT, operational technology. So the point is, there's just an enormous amount of data that has to be integrated, looked at, analyzed for threat detection, for forensics, if God forbid we have an incident. And so we rely very, very heavily on automation to kind of collect it all up, integrate it, put it into various devices where we can analyze it and so forth. We'd be lost without that. We'd probably have to have 10 guys just fiddling around with data all day.